Let me ask you a question. Have you ever picked up something and thought, I should probably get rid of this? And then followed it immediately with, but what if somebody wants it? Like my dad who says, this will come in handy someday. Not today, not tomorrow, not even soon, just someday. If you've ever kept something because it might be useful, meaningful, or appreciated by somebody else, you're not alone. And if letting go of stuff feels oddly emotional, even when you know it's time, there's a reason for that too. Now, this video isn't about forcing yourself to declutter, and it's definitely not about telling you what you should do. It's about a few very real reasons why downsizing or even just letting go of things can feel harder than we expect, and when it might actually make sense not to downsize yet. As you're watching today, notice what comes up for you. You don't have to decide anything, just pay attention. And if you've ever caught yourself saying, I'll keep this just in case, you'll probably recognize yourself somewhere in this conversation. Here's the first thing I want you to know. When letting go of things feels emotional, it's usually not about the thing. It's about what the thing represents. For a lot of women, especially later in life, our belongings are tied to seasons, experiences, memories of who we were, what we were working towards, and the roles we played. I'll give you a very real example from my own life. Not long ago, I filled an entire shopping cart with books from my basement, books from when I was a student, books from when I was coaching, books from my triathlon racing years. None of those roles were wrong. They just aren't my primary focus anymore. And standing there with that cart as I donated them to ARC, I realized I wasn't just getting rid of books. I was acknowledging that some chapters of my life were complete. And the little bit of grief that came along with letting go of that version of myself that no longer is surprised me. Because on the surface, it sounds simple. It's just books. They're replaceable. Someone else can use them. But emotionally, it felt like I was saying goodbye to a version of myself that I had loved and that had mattered. And that's why this feels hard. Not because you're attached to things, but because those things are tied to real effort, real growth, your real life. So if you find yourself hesitating over something and thinking, why is this harder than it should be? What all that means is this: if letting go of things feels too emotional, it may be a sign that downsizing right now isn't the right move. Not forever, just not yet. Because sometimes the hesitation really isn't about the stuff at all. Sometimes it's pointing to something bigger. And that brings us to another important reason some women shouldn't rush to downsize. Your life isn't just built around what's inside your home. It's built around where that home is. Another reason downsizing can feel harder than expected has nothing to do with stuff. It has to do with the place. If you've lived in the Denver metro area for a long time, Highlands Ranch, Littleton, Inglewood, Lakewood, your life is built around familiarity in ways you don't always notice until you think about changing it. You know which grocery store to avoid at 4:30. You know which route to take when C470's back up. You know where to park, where to walk, where to meet a friend without even thinking about it. That kind of familiarity is comfortable, easy, like a hug from a friend. I always smile when somebody says to me, well, I could live anywhere. And then 5 minutes later, they go, but I really like this coffee shop and this walking path, and I don't want to relearn everything. That's not being resistant to change, that's being human. When you think about downsizing, you're not just asking, where would I live? You're also asking, do I really want to give up what feels easy and known right now? For a lot of women, especially those moving solo, familiarity isn't laziness, it's stability, it's confidence, it's independence. I see this a lot with people who've lived in the Denver suburbs for decades. Their home may feel like too much, but their location still works beautifully for their life. It's close to friends, close to doctors, close to recreation centers, close to routines they enjoy. And that's a very real reason to pause before downsizing. This doesn't mean you should never move. It just means that sometimes the resistance isn't about fear. It's about not wanting to give up a life that still fits in important ways. And that's worth respecting. You know, this is often where women start asking timing questions. Not just if they should downsize, but when. And if that's something you've been wondering about, I have another video on timing and planning that might be helpful. I'll link it here and in the description so you can come back to it when you're ready. Now let's take a moment to talk about where you're actually at in this journey, because reason number 3 is really about not knowing what comes yet for you, and that's an okay place to be. Sometimes the hesitation isn't about your current home, it's about the fact that the next chapter isn't fully formed, and that can feel uncomfortable. You know, a lot of women think they need a clear picture of what's next before they make a move. Where they'll live, how they'll spend their time, what their days will look like. But often at this stage of life, the picture's still coming into focus. You might know what you don't want, but you're not quite sure what you do want instead. And that in-between space can make downsizing feel premature. I hear women say things like, I just want to simplify. And when I ask what that looks like, they'll laugh and say, I don't know yet, I just know this isn't it. And that's actually a very honest place to be. If you downsize before you have at least a general sense of what's next, you can can end up feeling unsettled instead of relieved. Not because you made a bad decision, but because you made a permanent change while you were still figuring things out. And for women moving solo, that uncertainty can feel heavier. I see this with a lot of people here in the Denver metro area. They're not ready to leave the suburbs, but they're also not sure they want to stay in the exact same setup. So they pause, not because they're stuck, but because they're listening to themselves. And that pause is often wisdom, not fear. If this resonates with you, you might ask yourself this question. Do I feel clear about what I'm moving toward, or am I just focused on what I'm moving away from? You don't have to answer it now, but it's an important distinction, because when that clarity hasn't formed yet, rushing to downsize can create more stress than relief, which brings us to another reason many women decide to wait and not downsize just yet. Here's another big reason many women hesitate to downsize, and this one comes up all the time. You're keeping things not because you need them, you're keeping them because you think somebody else will. The kids, the grandkids, the nieces, the nephews, or that vague, hopeful future person we all imagine. This is where I hear things like, well, they might want it someday, or when they have a bigger place, they'll have room for this. And when we slow that down a bit, what we usually mean is they don't want it now, but maybe later, when they have more space, or taste, or interest, or time. And sometimes the answer is simply they don't. And that's okay. This isn't really about furniture or dishes or collections. It's about connection. It's about wanting the people we love to want something that mattered to us, or wanting a part of our life to carry forward through them. So when you hesitate, it's not because you're cluttered, it's because you care. I see this with my clients, especially those whose kids moved out of state or live in smaller homes, condos, townhomes, different lifestyles. What fits beautifully in a Highlands Ranch or Littleton home doesn't often fit the life their kids are living now. And that's not rejection, it's just reality. If you're holding on to things because you're unsure how to let them go, that's not always a sign you should downsize right now. It might be a sign that you need more time, more clarity, or more conversation before making a big move. Sometimes the work isn't downsizing, it's adjusting expectations gently. This is where I'll ask you to think about something, and you can answer it quietly, or you can share it if you'd like. Is there something you're holding on to mostly because you think someone else might want it? If so, you're definitely not alone. And when expectations, especially family expectations, are still tangled up in the decision, rushing to downsize can create more stress than relief. Which brings us to the last reason you may want to wait to downsize. Here's another reason not to downsize just yet, and this one surprises a lot of women. Downsizing feels like it should create freedom, and eventually it does. But if it's done too early or too fast, it can actually take options away. When you sell a home you've owned for a long time, you're not just changing your space, you're changing how much flexibility you have, how much control you keep, and how many choices remain open. Especially for women moving solo, that matters. Once you downsize, your storage changes, your layout changes, your ability to host, help, or adapt may change. And sometimes women realize after they move that they've downsized more than they needed to. Not because it was wrong, but because they weren't done deciding yet. And again, that can feel unsettling. I see this here in the Denver metro area. When women move out of long-time homes too quickly, they think they're simplifying, but then they realize they miss the flexibility they had before. Room for visiting family, room to adjust as life changes, room to make decisions based on their own timeline. That doesn't mean downsizing was a mistake, it just means the timing mattered more than they expected. I've had women say to me later, half laughing, I downsized and then life changed again, which is kind of the theme of adulthood, isn't it? Life rarely stays still long enough for us to make a perfectly timed move. If you're feeling pressure to downsize from the market, from friends, from articles you've read, it's okay to pause. Waiting doesn't mean you're stuck. It means you're choosing to keep options open. And for a lot of women, that's the most empowering choice of all. As you think about downsizing, here's a question worth sitting with. Does downsizing right now give me more flexibility, or does it take some away? And am I okay with the answer? That answer can change over time, which is perfectly okay. So if you've been feeling conflicted about downsizing, I hope this gave you something important. Perspective. Sometimes the question isn't why am I holding on? It's what am I still honoring, protecting, or trying to figure out? And choosing not to downsize just yet doesn't mean you're avoiding a decision. It means you're making a thoughtful one. By the way, if we haven't met yet, my name is Peggy Dursthoff with Live Denver Suburbs, powered by HomeSmart. And I help women over 50 make smart housing decisions on their own without pressure, confusion, or costly mistakes. If this video was helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe. I post videos every week to help you think through downsizing, selling, and moving forward without pressure and without regret. I'll link another video here that many women find helpful when they're still sorting through what stays, what goes, and what really matters. So you can keep watching when it feels right.